Last time, we entered the realm of the divine, meeting Zeus, the thunder-wielding king of the gods, Poseidon, the tempestuous ruler of the seas, and Hades, the silent lord of the underworld. We even witnessed the birth of wisdom itself, when Athena, the goddess of intellect and strategy, emerged fully formed from the mind of Zeus. But the pantheon of Olympus is far from complete, because the world of the gods was not just about thunder and war. It was also about love, beauty, art, chaos, and fate itself. In this second part, we'll journey deeper into the heart of Greek mythology, to uncover the truth behind the gods of passion, music, and destiny. Who was the goddess that could drive both gods and mortals mad with desire? Who was the god whose music could charm even the stones? And who was the one who held the power to weave the threads of fate itself? From the radiant halls of Olympus, to the darkest corners of human emotion, this is the 12 Olympian gods, Part 2. The power, the passion, and the myths that shaped the world. If Zeus ruled the skies and Poseidon ruled the seas, then Apollo ruled something far more subtle, the realm of the mind, the heart, and the eternal dance between light and shadow. He was called Phoebus Apollo, the Shining One, the god of the sun, of music and poetry, of prophecy and healing. A being so radiant that wherever he walked, the darkness itself seemed to retreat. But behind that glow was a god far more complex than most remember. Because Apollo didn't just bring light to the world, he also cast the longest shadows. Born on the floating island of Delos, Apollo and his twin sister Artemis came into the world under divine tension. Their mother, Leto, had been cursed by Hera, forbidden to give birth on any solid ground. So, the island of Delos rose from the sea, anchored by divine will, to give sanctuary for the twins destined to change the world. When Apollo first opened his eyes, the island itself was said to glow like dawn. And from the moment he drew his first breath, the world felt balanced. For where Artemis would rule the night and the hunt, Apollo would rule the day and the arts of civilization. They were twins, yet opposites. She, the moonlight that guides through silence. He, the sunlight that inspires through brilliance. Together, they embodied the eternal dance of light and darkness, reason and instinct. To the Greeks, Apollo was not just the sun. He was illumination itself. He governed the clarity of thought, the discipline of music, the balance of medicine, and the divine spark that turns chaos into creation. When Apollo played his golden lyre, a gift from Hermes, who had once stolen his cattle, the universe seemed to move in rhythm with him. Every note echoed the harmony of the cosmos, every song a reflection of divine order. He was the perfect fusion of art and reason, beauty and intellect entwined in human form. And this duality made him both adored and feared, because the same light that reveals truth can also expose flaws we'd rather keep hidden. Far from Olympus, on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, stood the sacred temple of Delphi. Here, mortals came from every corner of the ancient world, kings, warriors, and philosophers, all seeking the voice of Apollo. It was said that the god spoke through his priestess, the Pythia, who sat upon a tripod above a fissure that released vapors from the earth. In her trance, she uttered words that Apollo placed in her mind, visions of the future, riddles of fate, and glimpses of divine truth. The Oracle of Delphi became the beating heart of ancient Greece's spirituality and politics. Before every great war, before every voyage, before every decision that could change history, mortals turned to Apollo's oracle. But Apollo's messages were never simple. They came wrapped in riddles, truth hidden in metaphor. Because light, after all, can blind as easily as it reveals. Before Delphi became Apollo's sanctuary, it belonged to something ancient and dark. A monstrous serpent named Python, born of the earth itself, guarded the sacred springs and spoke its own ancient prophecies. When Apollo arrived, the beast rose to defend its domain. But the young god, radiant with power, took up his silver bow and unleashed arrows of pure sunlight. Python's death marked more than just victory. It was the triumph of order over chaos, of divine light over primal darkness. And from that moment, Apollo claimed the Oracle of Delphi as his own, turning it into the most powerful center of prophecy the ancient world would ever know. Yet, in slaying the creature, Apollo also inherited its burden, to bear the weight of truth, and to carry the loneliness that comes with knowing too much. Apollo's gift of music was unmatched, but that perfection often inspired envy and challenge. One day, a satyr named Marsyas found a flute left behind by Athena. When he played it, his melodies enchanted all who listened. Drunk with pride, Marsyas challenged Apollo to a musical contest. The god agreed, but with one condition: the winner could do whatever he pleased to the loser. They played lyre against flute, and the contest echoed through valleys and mountains. At first, they seemed evenly matched, but then Apollo demanded that they play their instruments upside down. Marsyas tried and failed, for what is mortal cannot imitate the divine. As punishment, Apollo flayed him alive, a gruesome reminder that arrogance before the gods always ends in ruin. Yet beneath the cruelty of the tale lies a deeper message: the pursuit of perfection is beautiful but dangerous. Apollo, the god of harmony, could also become the god of merciless judgment. Because even light, when too intense, can burn. Despite his radiance, Apollo's love stories were rarely happy. For the god of beauty and music, love often turned into tragedy. One of the most famous was his love for Daphne, a river nymph. Struck by Eros's arrow of rejection, Daphne fled from Apollo's pursuit. As he reached out to embrace her, she cried out to her father, the river god Peneus, to save her. And in that instant, her flesh turned to bark, her hair to leaves, and her arms stretched skyward as branches of a laurel tree. Heartbroken, Apollo could only hold her in her new form. He declared the laurel sacred to him, a symbol of eternal love and victory. Every wreath placed on the head of a poet, athlete, or conqueror was a reminder of the love Apollo could never have. Another tragedy followed with Hyacinthus, a beautiful mortal youth whom Apollo adored. While playing a friendly game of discus, a gust of wind, sent by the jealous god Zephyrus, turned the discus back, striking Hyacinthus and killing him. From his blood, Apollo made a flower bloom, the hyacinth, so that his name and beauty would never fade. Through these stories, Apollo's perfection becomes painfully human. He could heal the sick, predict the future, and bring harmony to the world, yet he could not save those he loved most. Because even gods, it seems, cannot escape the tragedy of love. What makes Apollo fascinating is not his perfection, but his contradictions. He was the god of healing and of plague, the bringer of prophecy and of confusion, the embodiment of beauty and of devastating loss. He represented the balance between order and chaos, logic and emotion, sunlight and darkness. The Greeks saw in him a mirror of their own struggles, the pursuit of knowledge, the pain of love, the desire for control over fate. Apollo was what humanity could be at its best, and what it feared becoming at its worst. He was the golden ideal, and the warning that too much light can destroy as surely as darkness. In art, Apollo was always portrayed as eternally young, his face flawless, his body symmetrical, his gaze calm yet piercing, like a sunrise frozen in time. But his legacy went beyond marble and myth. The ideals he represented, reason, balance, beauty, truth, became the foundation of Western civilization itself. The arts, philosophy, medicine, even the Renaissance centuries later, all carried Apollo's light. He was more than a god. He was a symbol that within every human being lies a divine spark, a yearning for harmony in a chaotic world. And perhaps that's why Apollo remains timeless. Because in every melody, every poem, every search for truth, his light still burns. When the sun sets and Apollo's golden light fades from the sky, another light rises, cold, silver, and serene. It's the moon, silent, watchful, eternal. And under its glow walks Artemis, the goddess of the hunt. If Apollo represents the brilliance of reason and civilization, Artemis embodies the wild, untamed, instinctive, and fiercely free. She is the whisper of the forest, the guardian of beasts, and the protector of every child born into this unpredictable world. Her arrows are silver, her eyes calm yet dangerous, and her loyalty belongs to no man, no god, only to nature itself. Artemis is not just the goddess of the moon and wilderness. She is the spirit of independence. Long before she became the huntress of legend, Artemis was born under perilous circumstances. Her mother, Leto, had been cursed by Hera, who forbade her from giving birth on any land touched by sunlight. Leto wandered across the earth, rejected by island after island, until she found refuge on the floating island of Delos. a place not anchored to the earth, free from Hera's curse. There, under the shimmering reflection of the moon, Leto gave birth first to Artemis, and then, with her daughter's help, to her twin brother, Apollo. From her very first breath, Artemis was not a helpless child, she was a protector. She aided her mother in the act of birth, becoming forever the guardian of women in labor and of all children who would follow. It was said that the cries of newborns reached her first, and that the moonlight shining through the window was her gentle blessing. When Artemis grew older, she approached her father, Zeus, and made a bold request. She asked for eternal chastity, a vow to remain forever free from the bonds of marriage or love. She wanted no man to command her, no god to possess her. Instead, she asked for her own bow and arrows, a pack of loyal nymphs to accompany her, and the right to roam wild forests and untamed mountains, where the only laws were those of nature. Zeus, both proud and wary of her fierce independence, granted her wish. And so, Artemis became the eternal maiden, the virgin huntress, free from the chains of desire and corruption. But her purity was not weakness. It was power, a declaration that her strength came not from love or alliance, but from her unyielding sense of self. In the forests of Arcadia, under the pale shimmer of her moon, Artemis ran with deer and wolves, moving silently through the trees, her bow always ready. Every creature was her kin, every grove her temple. The Greeks feared and revered her in equal measure. They saw her in the rustle of the leaves, in the reflection of moonlight upon still water, in the quiet moments before a predator strikes. She was nature's balance, the huntress and the protector, the life-taker and the life-giver. Those who hunted with respect were blessed. Those who killed for sport or greed were cursed. To Artemis, the forest was sacred, a place where every heartbeat mattered. And though she was known as the goddess of the hunt, her arrows often struck only when balance demanded it. Beyond the wilderness, Artemis's domain extended into the human world. She watched over women, especially in moments of danger or childbirth. Her presence was both comfort and warning, gentle to the innocent, merciless to the cruel. Mothers prayed to her for safe deliveries, young girls offered her flowers before marriage, and priestesses dedicated their lives to her service, swearing the same vow of purity that she had made to Zeus. Yet, she was not only protector, she was avenger. When the vulnerable were harmed, Artemis's wrath was swift and exacting. Because beneath her calm moonlight, she held the storm of divine retribution. Her justice was cold, but fair. For Artemis did not act from hatred, but from principle, a sacred duty to protect balance, innocence, and nature itself. One of the most famous stories about Artemis reveals the peril of violating her boundaries. Actaeon was a skilled hunter, a mortal known for his courage and pride. One day, while wandering the forest with his hounds, he stumbled upon a hidden grove, a sacred spring where Artemis and her nymphs bathed after the hunt. In that moment, Actaeon saw what no mortal man was meant to see, the goddess herself, unveiled beneath the sunlight filtering through the trees. Artemis's eyes met his, not with shame but with fury. Before he could speak, she raised her hand and splashed him with a handful of water. At once, his body began to twist and morph. His arms turned to legs, his hands to hooves, and from his head sprouted antlers. Actaeon had become a stag, a creature he once hunted. When he tried to call for help, his voice came out as a desperate bellow. And in a cruel twist of fate, his own hounds, not recognizing their master, chased him down and tore him apart. Artemis watched in silence, not with pleasure but with cold justice. For to gaze upon a goddess without consent was to defy the boundary between mortal and divine, a boundary she defended without mercy. Artemis's independence made her one of the most respected deities in the Greek pantheon, but also one of the most feared. She punished arrogance without hesitation. When the king Agamemnon killed a sacred stag in her forest, Artemis stilled the winds, preventing his fleet from sailing to Troy. Only after he sacrificed his own daughter, Iphigenia, did she allow the winds to blow again, though in some versions, she saved the girl at the last moment, replacing her with a deer. Artemis's justice was not cruel, it was balanced. She demanded respect for nature, humility before the divine, and recognition of life's sacred rhythm. Even mighty kings learned to bow before her will. The moon was her mirror, distant, serene, and ever-changing. Its phases mirrored her moods. The waxing moon for youth and vitality, the full moon for strength and clarity, and the waning moon for rest and reflection. At night, when mortals looked up, they saw her silver chariot glide across the heavens. Her bow became the crescent moon, her arrows the stars that pierced the darkness. For the Greeks, Artemis was a symbol of the eternal feminine, not submissive or fragile, but powerful, pure, and self-possessed. She moved between worlds, light and dark, mortal and divine, gentle and fierce, never belonging fully to either and never needing to. Unlike many gods who craved temples and gold, Artemis preferred solitude. Her temples were forests, her prayers were whispers carried by the wind. She didn't rule through fear or demand obedience. Her power came from something deeper, respect. To the Greeks, Artemis was not just a goddess to worship, but an ideal to aspire to. She represented freedom, the courage to walk alone, to follow one's own path, and to protect what is sacred, even when the world stands against you. Her followers, mostly women and young maidens, saw in her a reflection of themselves, their struggles for autonomy, dignity, and strength. In a world ruled by gods of war and desire, Artemis was something rare, a goddess who asked for nothing but earned everything. Artemis and Apollo, though twins, were bound by an unspoken understanding. He was the day, she was the night. He brought clarity, she brought mystery. Together, they completed the cycle of time itself. When Apollo's chariot descended beneath the horizon, Artemis's bow rose in the sky. Their lights never touched, but their souls were forever intertwined. It's said that when mortals gaze upon the moon, they do not just see light reflected from the sun. They see Artemis's watchful eye, guarding the world in silence. Even now, when the forest sleeps and shadows stretch long, some say you can still hear her steps, light as air, swift as thought, as she walks the line between night and dawn, between divinity and wilderness. Artemis's image endured long after the fall of Olympus. To poets and artists, she became the symbol of feminine power and autonomy. To mystics, she was the moon's spirit, a reminder of the cycles of life and rebirth. She showed that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it walks alone in the forest, sometimes it shines quietly in silver light. And though her world of nymphs and sacred groves may have faded into myth, her message remains timeless: be wild. Be true. Be free. When peace falls silent, and the ground trembles beneath marching feet, when shields clash and the air fills with the roar of men, that is when Ares awakens. He is not the god of justice, nor of glory, nor of noble defense. He is the god of war itself, raw, unfiltered, and merciless. Ares is not strategy or discipline like Athena. He is the bloodlust, the rage, the primal fire that drives humanity to destroy and dominate. To invoke his name is to summon chaos. And even among the Olympians, he was both feared and despised. Ares was the son of Zeus and Hera, a product of power, pride, and resentment. But unlike his siblings who ruled over elements and wisdom, Ares inherited something more volatile: the fury of the storm, the heartbeat of battle. From the moment of his birth, the sound of thunder seemed to follow him. His cradle was not rocked by lullabies, but by the distant echoes of war. Zeus never truly loved his son. He saw Ares not as a leader, but as a weapon, a reflection of everything he tried to suppress within himself. And Hera saw in Ares her own rage made flesh. She admired his strength, yet feared what he could become. Perhaps that's why Ares grew into a god who could love no peace, for peace had never loved him first. Ares was the embodiment of battle itself, not its tactics, not its politics, but its heartbeat. When armies marched, he walked among them unseen. When the first arrow flew, his laughter echoed through the smoke. He didn't care who was right or wrong, only that the ground would soon drink blood. To mortals, he appeared as a towering warrior clad in bronze, his eyes burning with the fire of conquest. Behind him rode two spectral figures: Phobos, fear, and Deimos, terror, his twin sons who accompanied him into every battle. Where Ares tread, courage died. Where his shadow fell, nations burned. He was the uncontrollable force that no god, not even Zeus, could truly restrain. In Greek myth, Ares' greatest rival was not a monster or a mortal hero, but his own half-sister, Athena. Where Ares represented the chaos of war, Athena embodied its discipline, strategy, wisdom, and control. To her, war was a necessary tool. To him, it was a passion. In the eyes of the Greeks, This contrast defined two sides of human nature: the mind and the muscle, the reason and the rage. Many tales speak of Ares charging into battle, only to be outmaneuvered by Athena's calm precision. He was strength without thought, while she was thought armed with strength. And though Athena often triumphed, the Greeks understood a grim truth: that neither could exist without the other. For even the most brilliant strategy is meaningless without the will to fight. And even the fiercest warrior is blind without purpose. Ares and Athena were not enemies, they were reflections, two halves of the eternal war within the human soul. It may seem strange that a god born of violence would find his greatest passion in the goddess of love. Yet Ares and Aphrodite were inseparable, fire and silk, blood and beauty intertwined. Their affair began in secrecy. Aphrodite, though married to the smith god Hephaestus, was drawn to Ares's wild nature. He represented everything Hephaestus was not: powerful, impulsive, and dangerously alive. When they met, the world seemed to hold its breath. Love and war became one, but their passion, like all extremes, was doomed to collapse under its own fire. One day, the sun god Helios witnessed their affair and told Hephaestus. The smith forged an invisible net, trapping the lovers in bed for all Olympus to see. The gods laughed, but Ares's pride burned hotter than ever. For him, humiliation was worse than death. He fled to Thrace, his sacred land of warriors, vowing to never again be mocked by gods of peace. Still, he could never stay away for long, because even the god of war needs something, or someone, to fight for. Their love was dangerous, reckless, and immortal, a reminder that passion and destruction often share the same heartbeat. Ares was not a patient god. His temper could be triggered by the smallest slight, and his vengeance was legendary. In one tale, a giant named Alode tried to imprison him in a bronze jar for 13 months. When he was finally freed by Hermes, his rage was so great that the very earth shook beneath his steps. In another, when the son of Poseidon assaulted his daughter Alcippe, Ares struck him dead on the spot. For this, he was put on trial before the gods, the first divine court ever held in myth. But even Zeus could not deny that his act was just. From that day on, the hill where he stood trial became sacred, the Areopagus, the Hill of Ares, the future site of Athens' courts of law. It was an irony worthy of Olympus. The god of war had helped create the symbol of justice. Because even chaos, in its rawest form, can sometimes restore balance. Among the gods, Ares was often treated as an outsider. Zeus called him hateful. Athena mocked him as mindless, and even mortals prayed to him with trembling voices. He represented everything humanity feared within itself: the uncontrollable urge to fight, the love of conflict for its own sake. In Homer's Iliad, Ares takes to the battlefield, fighting beside the Trojans. When Athena aids the Greeks, she wounds him with a single spear strike. He screams so loudly that his voice shakes heaven and earth. He flees back to Olympus, bleeding, humiliated, and raging. And Zeus, looking down upon his son, snarls, "To me, you are the most hateful of all gods who dwell on Olympus. For strife and battle are dear to your heart." Those words cut deeper than any spear. For beneath his armor of fury, Ares was still a son, one who longed for his father's approval and never received it. Perhaps that's why he fought endlessly, not just against mortals, but against the emptiness inside him. To the Greeks, Ares was not a hero, but neither was he a villain. He was war made flesh, and war, by nature, is both destroyer and creator. Cities rise after conquest. Empires are born from ashes. Every civilization that praised Athena's wisdom was built on the bones left behind by Ares's chaos. In him, the Greeks saw the truth they dared not speak: that conflict is part of life, and that destruction is the twin of creation. Ares did not cause war. He was war, and as long as mortals desired power, his name would never be forgotten. Ares's influence stretched far beyond the battlefield. He lived in the pulse of human emotion, in every act of courage, every spark of rage, every rebellion against fate. To soldiers, he was the flame that burned away fear. To tyrants, he was the justification for conquest. To poets, he was a symbol of passion turned to ruin. He represented the side of humanity that both terrifies and defines us: the desire to fight, to win, to assert control over chaos, even when it costs everything. And that's why, despite his reputation, the Greeks never fully rejected Ares. They feared him, yes, but they also needed him. Because without struggle, there is no progress. Without conflict, there is no change. And without Ares, there can be no peace to long for. Centuries after the fall of Olympus, Ares' spirit lived on, in warriors, generals, and dreamers who sought to shape the world with force. The Romans renamed him Mars, and unlike the Greeks, they revered him. To them, war was not chaos, it was glory, the engine of empire. Mars became the father of Rome's founder, Romulus, and the symbol of divine destiny. In this transformation, Ares finally found the respect he had long been denied. But the truth of Ares remained unchanged. He was not evil nor benevolent. He simply was. Every sword drawn in anger, every heartbeat before a battle cry, every act of defiance, was his whisper echoing through time. He is the reminder that peace has a price, and that the fire of life burns brightest only when tested by war. Before the dawn of humankind, before the Olympians took their thrones on Mount Olympus, a wave of divine beauty rose from the sea, literally. From the white foam that bubbled around the severed remains of Uranus, the sky god, a figure emerged, radiant, irresistible, and perfect. The gods called her Aphrodite, the goddess of love, beauty, and desire. She didn't walk out of the sea. She glided, surrounded by the whispers of waves and the scent of salt and roses. Wherever she stepped, flowers bloomed instantly. Even the gods, mighty and proud, lowered their eyes when she appeared. Because Aphrodite didn't just represent beauty, she was beauty itself. And yet, like every divine being in Greek myth, her beauty was both a gift and a curse. The ancient poet Hesiod described her birth as both divine and violent, a paradox fitting for her nature. She was born not from life, but from blood and foam, the aftermath of cosmic vengeance. From this act of destruction came the goddess of creation, the ultimate embodiment of duality. Aphrodite's arrival symbolized something new in the cosmos, the irresistible power of attraction. Not just romantic or physical love, but the fundamental force that binds all things, gods to mortals, mortals to fate, and fate to chaos. Zeus, wary of her power, immediately arranged her marriage to Hephaestus, the god of fire and craftsmanship. Hephaestus was brilliant but crippled, humble but diligent, the complete opposite of Aphrodite's radiant allure. It was a political move, a way to keep her influence contained. But love, as Aphrodite would prove time and time again, cannot be contained. Though she was bound by marriage, Aphrodite's heart and passion belonged elsewhere. Among all her lovers, none stirred her spirit like Ares, the god of war. Their union was a dance between chaos and seduction, love meeting violence, beauty embracing destruction. They were the embodiment of passion in its purest, rawest form, the attraction that could start wars and end them just as quickly. Their love affair became legendary, whispered among gods and mortals alike. They met in secret, hidden in chambers of gold. But one day, their affair was exposed, literally. Hephaestus, betrayed but not foolish, crafted an invisible net of unbreakable chains. He cast it over the lovers mid-embrace, trapping them in front of the entire pantheon. The gods laughed, mocking their humiliation, but Aphrodite remained calm. Her shame turned to power. Even in her vulnerability, she was mesmerizing. The laughter of the gods only reminded everyone. Even in scandal, she held their gaze. That was Aphrodite's true strength. Her beauty was not simply skin deep. It was a force that could bend even immortals to her will. To love Aphrodite was to invite both ecstasy and ruin. She could bless, but she could also curse. When she was adored, the world flourished, lovers united, poets wrote their masterpieces, and songs filled the air. But when she was scorned or disrespected, her vengeance was terrible. Take, for instance, the story of Psyche, a mortal woman whose beauty rivaled even the goddess herself. Mortals began worshipping Psyche instead of Aphrodite, leaving the goddess' temples empty. Enraged by this insult, Aphrodite sent her son Eros, known to mortals as Cupid, to make Psyche fall in love with the most hideous creature alive. But love, unpredictable as ever, betrayed its own goddess. Eros himself fell in love with Psyche. Their story became one of trials, pain, and redemption, but also a quiet rebellion against Aphrodite's control. In the end, Psyche was granted immortality, and even Aphrodite was forced to accept her as an equal. This story revealed something vital about the goddess of love. Even she, the divine personification of desire, could not fully master love itself. It was bigger than her, wilder, more mysterious, and often crueler. In art and poetry, Aphrodite was depicted in two contrasting ways. To the Greeks, there were two Aphrodites. Aphrodite Urania, born from the heavens, representing spiritual and divine love. Aphrodite Pandemos, born of the sea, representing physical and sensual desire. This duality mirrored the two sides of human affection, the love that uplifts and the love that consumes. She was the goddess who could unite souls or tear them apart. Her beauty was irresistible, but her influence was subtle and far-reaching. She could soften the hearts of kings, turn warriors into poets, and make even the wisest gods act like fools. She represented the uncontrollable force that lies beneath all civilization, the craving for connection, validation, and passion. Aphrodite didn't just embody love, she reminded mortals that love could be both divine and destructive. That desire could build empires or burn them down. One of Aphrodite's most famous acts shaped the course of history itself, or at least mythological history. At the wedding of Peleus and Thetis, the goddess Eris, goddess of discord, threw a golden apple into the crowd, engraved with the words, "For the fairest." 3 goddesses claimed it: Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. To decide, Zeus appointed a mortal prince, Paris of Troy, to judge. Each goddess offered him a bribe. Hera promised power. Athena offered wisdom and victory. Aphrodite offered the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen of Sparta. Paris chose Aphrodite, and with that choice, he doomed his city. Helen was already married to King Menelaus of Sparta, and her abduction, or seduction, sparked the Trojan War. Thus, through beauty and desire, Aphrodite set in motion one of the greatest tragedies in Greek mythology. She didn't wield a sword, but her weapon was far deadlier, the human heart. In the end, Aphrodite's power wasn't just in her beauty or her allure. It was in her reflection of humanity's deepest truths. Every story about her reveals the same paradox. Love is creation and destruction, pleasure and pain, devotion and madness. She reminds us that to love is to risk everything: sanity, pride, and even destiny itself. Her influence stretched beyond Olympus, touching every mortal heart, every fleeting glance, every whispered confession in the dark. When sailors prayed for calm seas, they called to Poseidon. When kings sought victory, they turned to Athena. But when mortals felt the fire of desire or the ache of heartbreak, they knew whose hand was at work. Aphrodite, the goddess who rose from the sea, unbound by rules, untamed by gods, and unforgettable to mortals. She was not just the goddess of love. She was love, in all its radiant beauty and terrifying chaos. In a realm where beauty, strength, and perfection defined divinity, there was one god who stood apart, a god not of flawless form or thunderous power, but of sparks, steel, and scars. His name was Hephaestus, the god of fire and craftsmanship, the divine blacksmith whose hands shaped the weapons of gods and heroes alike. While others ruled the heavens, the seas, or the underworld, Hephaestus ruled the forge, a place of heat, noise, and endless creation. To some, it was chaos. To him, it was home. He was the only Olympian who limped instead of walked, who sweated instead of glowed, and who built rather than conquered. Yet in his imperfection, Hephaestus found a kind of divinity that even Zeus could not command: the power to create beauty out of pain. Hephaestus' story began not with triumph but rejection. According to one myth, he was born to Hera alone, a child conceived without Zeus, born out of spite and pride. Hera, desiring to prove she could create life without a man, willed him into existence. But when she saw him, she recoiled. He was not like the other gods. His leg was twisted, his form imperfect. Ashamed of his deformity, Hera cast her newborn son from Mount Olympus, hurling him down into the sea. He fell for an entire day and night before crashing into the waters below. Broken, but alive, he was rescued by the sea goddesses Thetis and Eurynome, who raised him in secret. In their underwater grotto, surrounded by coral and shells, the young god found comfort in the hum of creation. He discovered fire, metal, and the art of shaping raw materials into form. While the other gods reveled in beauty, Hephaestus forged it. and though he had been rejected by his mother and forgotten by Olympus, he would one day make the heavens tremble with the sound of his hammer. Years later, Hephaestus crafted a magnificent golden throne, one of unmatched beauty and craftsmanship. He sent it to Mount Olympus as a gift to Hera, but when she sat upon it, the throne's secret was revealed. It was a trap. Chains of invisible metal wrapped around her, binding her tight. The gods panicked. No one could free the queen of Olympus. Zeus sent Ares, Apollo, and even Hermes to retrieve Hephaestus, but none could persuade him to return. The rejected son had become the master of metal, and now, even the gods were at his mercy. Finally, Dionysus, the god of wine and revelry, visited Hephaestus with a different approach. Instead of threats, he brought laughter and drink. He offered friendship, and when Hephaestus was drunk with joy and wine, Dionysus led him back to Olympus on a donkey, a sight so absurd that even Zeus laughed. Moved by his craftsmanship and cunning, the gods welcomed Hephaestus back into their ranks. Hera, both humbled and proud, forgave him. From that day forward, Hephaestus became the divine smith of Olympus, the one who forged the thunderbolts of Zeus, the trident of Poseidon, and the armor of heroes. Hephaestus' forge was unlike anything mortals could imagine. Deep within the heart of Olympus, his workshop burned with divine fire. Anvils rang like thunder, sparks flew like stars. His golden automatons, self-moving creations of metal, assisted him, proof that he was not only a smith but an inventor far ahead of his time. To Zeus, he crafted thunderbolts that could split the sky. For Poseidon, he shaped the trident that could shake the earth and seas. For Hermes, he forged the winged helmet and sandals that made him swifter than the wind. And for Achilles, he created armor so bright and unbreakable that even gods marveled at it. Hephaestus' art was not merely functional, it was alive. Every object he created carried emotion, meaning, and a touch of his soul. His forge was a paradox, a place of violence that gave birth to beauty, of fire that created life. But perhaps his most controversial creation was Pandora. When Prometheus stole fire from Olympus to give to mankind, Zeus was furious. To punish humanity for their defiance, he commanded Hephaestus to mold the first woman out of clay. The god of fire obeyed, but what he created would change the course of myth forever. Hephaestus shaped Pandora with delicate precision. Her eyes sparkled like the sea, her skin glowed like the morning light. Aphrodite gifted her beauty, Hermes gave her cunning, Athena taught her skill, and Zeus, the architect of her existence, gave her curiosity and a mysterious jar, or box, which she was forbidden to open. When Pandora finally lifted the lid, every evil known to mankind escaped: disease, greed, sorrow, envy. Only hope remained. In this act, Hephaestus became not just a creator of divine tools, but the god who crafted humanity's greatest paradox, the beauty that brings both wonder and suffering. Despite his brilliance, Hephaestus' personal life was filled with loneliness. His marriage to Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty, was arranged, not born of love. Zeus hoped the union would balance fire with desire, but it only deepened the god's pain. Aphrodite, drawn to excitement and passion, found no thrill in her husband's quiet devotion. She sought comfort in the arms of Ares, the god of war. When Hephaestus discovered their affair, his response was not rage, it was precision. With the same skill he used to forge the weapons of gods, he crafted an invisible net of fine bronze and trapped the lovers in their act of betrayal. Then he summoned the Olympians to witness their shame. The gods laughed, but beneath their laughter was discomfort. They saw in Hephaestus a mirror of something they despised, the reminder that even gods could feel pain, jealousy, and humiliation. And yet, Hephaestus stood proud. He had turned his heartbreak into art, his humiliation into legend. His revenge was not in violence but in creation. What made Hephaestus unique among the Olympians was not his strength, but his endurance. He did not command storms or hearts, he forged them. Every strike of his hammer echoed the story of his life, pain transformed into purpose. He was proof that divinity could exist in imperfection, that brokenness could give birth to brilliance. His forge symbolized not destruction, but transformation. Fire, to Hephaestus, was not a weapon, it was redemption. He represented the power of resilience, the ability to rise from rejection, to turn scars into strength, to create meaning from suffering. While other gods demanded worship, Hephaestus earned it, through work, persistence, and artistry. To mortals, he was a reminder that beauty and strength are not born from perfection but from struggle. To the gods, he was an uncomfortable truth, that the crippled can be mighty and the flawed can be divine. In the hearts of blacksmiths, inventors, and creators throughout history, Hephaestus lives on. Every craftsman who shapes iron, every artist who works through pain, every person who finds purpose in imperfection carries a spark of his fire. His myth endures not because of grandeur, but because it speaks to something profoundly human, the eternal desire to build, even when broken. Hephaestus may have been cast from Olympus, but in the end, he became its heartbeat, the maker of its weapons, the shaper of its beauty, and the symbol of what it truly means to rise from the ashes. He reminds us that creation is not born from ease, but from endurance, and that even the gods need someone to hold the hammer that builds their world. If Zeus was the ruler of the heavens, Poseidon the master of the seas, and Hades the keeper of the dead, then Hermes was the thread that connected them all. He was the god of travelers, merchants, thieves, and messengers, moving freely between the worlds of gods and mortals, of life and death. He was the wind that whispered secrets, the spark of wit in chaos, the laughter between storms. No gate could bar him, no boundary could contain him. Wherever there was a road, a deal, a lie, or a prayer carried on the wind, Hermes was already there. He was the swift-footed trickster, the clever tongue of Olympus, and the bridge between realms. Yet behind his playful charm lay something deeper, a divine reminder that intelligence, adaptability, and humor were as powerful as thunder or war. Hermes was born in a hidden cave on Mount Cyllene in Arcadia. His mother, Maia, was one of the Pleiades, gentle and shy, dwelling far from the drama of Olympus. His father, of course, was Zeus, who had visited her in secret. From the very moment of his birth, Hermes was different. Most infants cry. Hermes laughed. Before the sun had even set on his first day alive, the newborn god wriggled free of his cradle and began exploring the world. That same night, still only hours old, he pulled off one of the most audacious pranks in mythic history, the theft of Apollo's cattle. While crawling through the meadows, Hermes spotted a herd of sacred cows belonging to his half-brother Apollo, the god of the sun. Most would have fled in fear. Hermes saw an opportunity. With a mischievous grin, he stole the entire herd, but not without style. To hide his tracks, he tied branches to the cows' tails so their footprints would be disguised, and even walked them backward, leading anyone who followed the trail in the wrong direction. When Apollo discovered the theft, he was furious. Guided by his prophetic insight, he confronted the baby god, only to find Hermes swaddled in his blanket, yawning innocently. "I've been here all day," Hermes said with wide-eyed sincerity. "Surely you wouldn't accuse a newborn of such a crime?" But Apollo was not easily fooled. He dragged Hermes to Olympus to face Zeus himself. The king of the gods, however, could not contain his laughter. Seeing his newborn son already displaying such cunning and charisma, Zeus decided not to punish him. Instead, Hermes returned the cattle, but in the process, he did something extraordinary. He created music. To apologize to Apollo, Hermes took a tortoise shell, stretched strings of sheep gut across it, and plucked them into a melody so beautiful that it silenced the heavens. It was the first lyre, the instrument that would become Apollo's greatest treasure. Moved by its sound, Apollo forgave the little thief and, in turn, gifted Hermes his golden staff, the caduceus, a symbol of peace, negotiation, and balance. That day, two brothers who could not have been more different, the radiant god of order and the cunning god of chaos, found harmony. And Zeus, watching them, smiled. For Hermes was not just a trickster, he was a diplomat. He could turn conflict into friendship, deception into art, and punishment into opportunity. From that moment forward, he became the messenger of the gods, the one who could speak in every tongue, walk in every world, and charm even death itself. As the official herald of Zeus, Hermes carried the words of Olympus across the cosmos. He wore winged sandals, talaria, and a winged hat that allowed him to travel faster than the wind. He was everywhere at once, guiding heroes on their quests, delivering divine warnings, escorting souls to the underworld. No god was more connected to both the divine and mortal worlds than Hermes. He appeared in countless myths, sometimes as a helper, sometimes as a trickster, but always as a presence that shaped destinies. When Perseus set out to slay Medusa, it was Hermes who guided him through the dark, gifting him the curved blade that could strike the Gorgon. When Odysseus faced the sorceress Circe, it was Hermes who gave him the herb moly, protecting him from her magic. And when mortals died, it was Hermes who gently took their souls by the hand and led them to the realm of Hades, earning him the title Psychopomp, the guide of souls. In every story, he was movement personified, the bridge between beginning and end, life and death, gods and mortals. Hermes was not a god of war or harvest, but of something far more fundamental, exchange. He ruled over travel, trade, negotiation, and communication, the lifeblood of civilization. Merchants prayed to him before their journeys. Travelers marked their paths with stone piles called Hermes, each one dedicated to him. Even thieves whispered his name before a heist, hoping he'd bless their cunning. To the Greeks, Hermes represented the chaos and opportunity of the open road, where anything could happen, and quick thinking was the difference between ruin and success. But there was wisdom in his mischief. Every trick he played had a purpose. He wasn't malicious, he was a mirror of humanity's cleverness, the instinct to survive and adapt. He understood that rules alone couldn't shape the world. Sometimes, bending them was the only way forward. Unlike Zeus's authority or Athena's intellect, Hermes' power lay in improvisation. He thrived in uncertainty. He could deceive gods without making enemies, and trick mortals without cruelty. His humor disarmed wrath, his speed escaped judgment. He was the god of loopholes, the embodiment of clever survival. In one myth, he even stole Ares' sword, simply to prove he could. In another, he switched 2 babies at birth, causing chaos just to observe the consequences. Yet he also restored balance afterward, as if reminding the world that every disruption creates opportunity. Hermes' duality made him both loved and feared. He could appear as a beggar or a nobleman, a guide or a trickster, a savior or a thief. But no matter his guise, he carried the same energy, the restless spark of curiosity and motion. Despite his mischief, Hermes had one of the most solemn duties of all the gods: to guide the souls of the dead. When a mortal's final breath escaped their lips, Hermes appeared, unseen, silent, compassionate. He did not judge or punish. He simply led them across the threshold, down the shadowed paths that led to Hades' realm. In this role, Hermes revealed a gentler side. The same god who could deceive kings could also comfort the dying. He was a constant reminder that life and death were part of the same journey. To mortals, this made him one of the most beloved gods. For while Hades ruled the underworld, it was Hermes who walked beside them as they entered it. He was not a god of endings, but of transition, the eternal traveler who never stayed still. More than any other Olympian, Hermes symbolized adaptability. He thrived in change, found meaning in motion, and turned obstacles into opportunities. To the Greeks, he represented the human mind at its best, clever, curious, and unstoppable. He didn't possess the strength of Ares or the wisdom of Athena, but he had something equally powerful: resourcefulness. The ability to think quickly, move freely, and speak persuasively. In a world of rigid hierarchies and divine laws, Hermes was proof that wit could rival power. He could weave through conflict, charm his way past danger, and solve problems not with force, but finesse. Hermes' influence has endured for millennia. His symbols, the winged sandals and the caduceus, have become emblems of speed, communication, and healing. In modern times, his image still appears in medicine, commerce, and travel. But beyond symbols, Hermes lives on as an idea, the spirit of movement, innovation, and change. He is the spark behind invention, the whisper that says, "Try it another way." He reminds us that cleverness is not deceit, but evolution, that humor can disarm conflict, and that the road less traveled is often the one that leads to truth. In every age, in every story, Hermes remains the messenger, not only between gods and mortals, but between possibility and reality. He was the god who could cross boundaries no one else dared to. The thief who could steal fire without punishment. The guide who could walk with the living and the dead. The voice that carried the will of Olympus and sometimes defied it. Hermes was not just the messenger of the gods. He was the movement of the universe itself, fast, free, and forever curious. Long before humans tamed the soil, before cities rose and granaries filled with golden wheat, there was Demeter, the gentle yet powerful goddess of the harvest. Her presence was felt in every sprouting seed, every rolling field of barley, and every loaf of bread shared between mortals. To the Greeks, she was not just a deity of crops, but the very embodiment of nurture itself, the one who made life possible. Demeter's story is one of love and loss, of the earth's bounty and its sorrow. It is a story that explains not just agriculture, but the seasons themselves, the rhythm of growth, death, and rebirth that sustains all living things. Demeter, daughter of Cronus and Rhea, was one of the elder Olympians, sister to Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, Hera, and Hestia. But unlike her siblings, whose realms were sky, sea, and underworld, Demeter's dominion was the living earth, the soil that cradles all life. Wherever she walked, grass would spring beneath her feet, flowers would bloom in her wake, and the barren hills would transform into lush meadows. Her hair was said to shimmer with the gold of ripe wheat, and her eyes reflected the calm richness of fertile lands. To the Greeks, Demeter's kindness was sacred. Farmers would pray to her before planting their seeds, and during harvest, they offered her the first fruits of their crops in gratitude. Without her blessing, famine would come, not as punishment, but as a reminder that all abundance depends on balance. Yet behind this nurturing figure lay a sorrow so deep that it shook even the gods. Her love for her daughter, Persephone, would test her divinity and reshape the natural world forever. Persephone was the light of Demeter's life, radiant, curious, and full of youthful grace. Together they roamed the fields, mother and daughter, surrounded by flowers and laughter. But one day, as Persephone wandered in a meadow of blooming narcissus, the earth suddenly split open with a thunderous roar. From the chasm rose Hades, god of the underworld, on his dark chariot of obsidian horses. Before she could cry for help, Hades seized her and vanished into the depths below. Demeter heard her daughter's distant scream, and when she arrived, the field lay silent, the flowers trampled, and the air heavy with sorrow. In that moment, her heart broke, and the world changed with it. The goddess searched endlessly, wandering from Olympus to the edge of the mortal realm. She disguised herself as an old woman, traveling through cities and villages, asking if anyone had seen her daughter. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months. The once green world began to wither under her grief. Crops failed, trees dropped their leaves, and famine spread across the land. Even the gods grew fearful, for without Demeter's favor, humanity would perish, and with them, the offerings that sustained Olympus would cease. At last, Helios, the all-seeing sun god, took pity on Demeter and revealed the truth. Her daughter was now queen of the underworld, taken by Hades with Zeus's reluctant consent. Enraged and heartbroken, Demeter confronted Zeus himself. "How could you, my brother, betray your own blood?" she thundered. "You sit upon your golden throne while my child is lost in shadow." Zeus, troubled by the dying earth, sought a compromise. He sent Hermes to the underworld to plead with Hades, asking him to release Persephone. The dark god agreed, but with a trick. Before Persephone departed, he offered her a pomegranate. Unaware of its consequence, she ate 6 seeds, binding her to his realm for 6 months of every year. When Persephone returned to the surface, Demeter's joy was boundless. The earth blossomed once more, flowers sprang from the frozen soil, and the warmth of life returned. But when the time came for Persephone to descend again to Hades, Demeter's sorrow fell over the world, and winter began. Thus, the Greeks explained the eternal rhythm of nature. When Persephone was above, the earth flourished. When she was below, it slept beneath the frost. Every sprout of spring, every golden summer field, was a mother's reunion with her child. Every autumn leaf and winter chill was her grief. Through this story, Demeter became more than a goddess of agriculture. She became the very symbol of life cycles. Birth and death, joy and sorrow, love and loss, all bound together in an endless circle, echoing her divine story. Her temples, especially the great sanctuary at Eleusis, became centers of mystery and worship. The Eleusinian Mysteries, secret rites dedicated to Demeter and Persephone, promised initiates a glimpse of the afterlife and the hope of rebirth. To participate in these sacred rituals was to understand that death was not the end, but part of a greater transformation. Though gentle, Demeter was not without anger. When disrespected, she could unleash famine upon those who forgot gratitude. In one tale, King Erisic then mocked her and cut down a sacred tree in her grove. As punishment, Demeter cursed him with insatiable hunger. No matter how much he ate, he starved. Desperate, he devoured everything he could find, until nothing remained, not even himself. Yet her compassion was vast. She blessed those who honored her and cared for the earth. Farmers who offered her the first fruits of their labor were said to live in abundance, for Demeter valued gratitude above all. She also took pity on mortals who suffered as she did. She knew the pain of losing loved ones, the helplessness of watching life fade, and that empathy made her one of the most human of the gods. Demeter's story is the heart of human existence, the dance between loss and renewal. She reminds us that even in despair, there is the promise of return. Every winter ends. Every barren field will bloom again. Her grief gave birth to the rhythm that sustains the world. To the ancients, every harvest was her blessing, every seed her hope. The scent of fresh bread, the touch of warm sunlight on grain fields, the whisper of the wind through the stalks, all these were her gifts to humankind. And perhaps that is why Demeter was revered not just as a goddess, but as a mother, not of a single child, but of all life itself. Her story teaches that from sorrow can come growth, and from endings, new beginnings. She was the nurturer and the mourner, the giver and the griever, the goddess who loved too deeply to let the world forget. Among the 12 Olympians, there was one who defied all expectations. Neither born in the golden halls of Olympus nor molded from divine order, Dionysus was wild, unpredictable, intoxicating, and free. He was the god of wine, theater, and ecstasy, but also of madness and revelation. Where the others ruled over domains of stability, law, wisdom, or the sea, Dionysus embodied the chaotic pulse of human emotion itself. He represented the freedom to feel everything: joy, sorrow, love, rage, creation, and destruction, all blended into one. His story is one of paradox, of a god who was both mortal and divine, gentle and terrifying, civilized and wild. And through him, the Greeks explored one of their deepest truths: that to truly live, one must embrace both order and chaos. Dionysus's birth was as strange as his nature. He was the son of Zeus and the mortal woman Semele, daughter of Cadmus, king of Thebes. When Hera, ever jealous of Zeus's affairs, discovered the affair, she disguised herself as an old woman and planted a deadly seed of doubt in Semele's heart. "If your lover is truly Zeus, the king of gods," Hera whispered, "then ask him to reveal himself in his full glory." Blinded by curiosity and trust, Semele made her request. Zeus, bound by his oath, appeared before her, not as a man, but as the god of lightning himself. His divine brilliance burned brighter than the sun. The mortal Semele was consumed by his fire, leaving nothing behind except the unborn child she carried. Overcome by grief, Zeus snatched the child from the ashes and sewed him into his own thigh, keeping him safe until the time of birth. And so, Dionysus was twice born, first from his mortal mother, then from the immortal body of Zeus himself. When the time came, the god emerged from his father's flesh, crying out with the voice of both man and god, a being forever caught between two worlds. But Hera's wrath was not finished. She sent madness upon Dionysus, driving him to wander the earth. Through distant lands he traveled, from Egypt to Phrygia, from India to Thrace, spreading the art of cultivating vines and the secret of making wine. His followers were a strange and devoted band, men and women who abandoned their cities and titles to join his ecstatic revels. They were known as the Maenads, women possessed by divine frenzy, and the Satyrs, half-human creatures who danced and sang with unrestrained delight. Together they roamed forests and mountains, drums pounding, flutes crying, bodies moving in wild rhythm beneath the moon. To outsiders, their worship seemed madness, but to the followers of Dionysus, it was divine liberation. They believed that in losing themselves, they found something greater, a connection to the raw essence of life. Wine was Dionysus's greatest gift to humankind, a symbol of transformation. It could bring laughter and intimacy, loosening the walls between souls. But it could also unleash the wildness buried deep within, rage, desire, or chaos. In this, Dionysus represented both sides of human nature. He was the joy of the feast and the madness of excess, the poet's inspiration and the drunkard's despair. His wine could heal or destroy, depending on how it was consumed. And that was the heart of his mystery. Dionysus was not about losing control, but about discovering what lies beneath it. He taught mortals that freedom without awareness becomes chaos, but awareness without freedom becomes a cage. He stood at the edge of both, the bridge between the civilized and the primal. Among the many myths of Dionysus, one stands out as both warning and revelation: the story of King Pentheus of Thebes. When Dionysus returned to Thebes, the birthplace of his mortal mother, he found that its new king, Pentheus, mocked his divinity. The young ruler saw the god's rites as disgraceful, calling his followers mad women and his music filth. Dionysus, disguised as a mortal priest, approached Pentheus and gently urged him to witness the truth for himself. Entranced by curiosity and pride, Pentheus agreed, and the god led him into the forest, where the Maenads danced in divine ecstasy. But as the drums grew louder and the night deepened, Pentheus's disguise fell away, and the Maenads, in their frenzy, mistook him for a beast. Overcome by divine madness, they tore him apart, limb by limb, believing they were serving their god. When dawn came, the forest was silent. Dionysus stood above the ruin, neither smiling nor weeping. His lesson was clear: those who deny the divine within themselves invite destruction. To reject the wild is to invite it to consume you. Another of Dionysus's famous tales involved King Midas, ruler of Phrygia. After finding and caring for the drunken satyr Silenus, one of Dionysus's closest companions, Midas was granted a wish in gratitude. Without thinking, the king asked that everything he touched turn to gold. At first, Midas rejoiced as his palace gleamed with treasure, but his joy turned to horror when even his food, his drink, and finally his daughter transformed to lifeless metal beneath his touch. Desperate, Midas fell to his knees and begged Dionysus to undo his gift. The god, ever merciful yet wise, instructed him to wash in the river Pactolus. When he did, the curse lifted and the sands of the river turned to gold. The story became a lesson across the ages. Excess and greed led only to isolation. Dionysus's gifts were meant to be savored, not consumed without restraint. Everything about Dionysus spoke of transformation. He blurred boundaries between mortal and god, man and woman, sanity and madness, life and death. Some depicted him as a beautiful youth crowned in ivy, others as a bearded wanderer draped in leopard skin. His form was fluid, ever-changing, a reflection of the freedom he represented. To the Greeks, he was not merely a god of intoxication, but of initiation, the one who could dissolve the illusion of separation. In his festivals, people wore masks, danced, and acted out the struggles of gods and men. These celebrations evolved into something that would shape culture forever: theater. The plays performed in his honor explored tragedy and comedy, pain and joy, the same duality that defined his own nature. Dionysus, the god of ecstasy, was also the god of art, because both are born from emotion unleashed. Among the Olympians, Dionysus was the youngest, the newcomer who shook the heavens with his wild spirit. Some say he replaced Hestia, goddess of the hearth, who stepped aside to preserve peace on Olympus. And in many ways, this made sense. Hestia represented order, stability, and the sacred fire of the home, while Dionysus represented the fire of passion, ever-changing and unpredictable. Together, they symbolized the balance of life: stillness and motion, reason and emotion, control and freedom. Without one, the other could not exist. The other gods respected Dionysus, but also feared him. He was the embodiment of something they could not fully control, the untamed heart of existence. To the ancient Greeks, madness was not simply insanity, it was divine possession, a state in which mortals touched the power of the gods. Dionysus offered this ecstasy not as punishment, but as a path to truth. Through him, they learned that freedom is not the absence of boundaries, it is the transcendence of them. His followers, the Maenads, entered such deep trance that they claimed to feel no pain, no fear. In those moments, they became one with nature, one with the divine. Theirs was not the madness of destruction, but of transformation. To lose oneself completely, Dionysus taught, is to find what lies beneath the mask. In the end, Dionysus was more than a god of wine. He was the god of life's raw truth, that joy and sorrow are inseparable, that creation and destruction are two faces of the same power. He reminds us that in every heart lies a wild spark longing to be free. To deny it is to live half a life. To embrace it, even for a moment, is to touch the divine. And so, the tapestry of Olympus grows richer with every name. We've seen the rise of Zeus, the wisdom of Athena, the fury of Poseidon, the sorrow of Hades, the love of Aphrodite, and now, the wild freedom of Dionysus, the god who dances between madness and divine joy. Each god, each story, is a reflection of us, of what it means to be human. The Olympians were never just rulers of the world above. They were mirrors of our own desires, fears, and contradictions. In their triumphs, we see our courage. In their flaws, our weakness. And in their eternal struggles, the truth that even gods must wrestle with the chaos within. But the story of Olympus isn't over yet. Beyond Dionysus's wine and Athena's wisdom lies the quiet flame of Hestia, the forgotten goddess of the hearth, the one who chose peace over power. And beyond her, the final truths of the Olympian age, how their legends shaped empires, religions, and the very way we understand divinity itself. The gods may seem distant, but in every spark of passion, every act of creation, every whisper of hope in the dark, their fire still burns. Hit like if you want more stories from the world of myth. Comment below, which Olympian speaks to you the most? And subscribe so you don't miss part 3, where we'll uncover the final secrets of the Olympians and the fate of the ancient world they ruled.